Hello, you're watching Daybreak on A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Let's see the headlines. The U.S. military campaign against Iran has cost an estimated $37.5 billion, according to the Pentagon. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy has appointed Major General Mikhailo Drapati as the country's new military chief after days of protests. The Lebanese army says it's deploying troops to a pilot zone following the withdrawal of Israeli forces. As U.S. strikes on Iran continue for an 11th day, the Pentagon is facing tough questions over both strategy and cost. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth came under sharp scrutiny in Congress while seeking more defense funding.
The U.S. military says it has completed its 11th straight day of strikes on Iran, targeting what it describes as military infrastructure across the country. Video released by U.S. Central Command showed what it said were airstrikes and surveillance footage from the operation. According to CENTCOM, the targets included military command centers, aircraft hangars, drone storage sites, maritime capabilities, and logistics facilities. CENTCOM also accused Iran of attacking more than 30 commercial vessels in the strategic waterway, saying those attacks have endangered civilian crews and disrupted freedom of navigation. In Washington, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told lawmakers that the military campaign has now cost an estimated $37.5 billion. Appearing before the Senate Appropriations Committee, Hegseth defended the operation while several senators questioned the rising cost of the campaign and the direction of U.S. leadership in the conflict.
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter. Either you do or you don't.
Meanwhile, residents in Tehran reported hearing explosions overnight as Iran activated air defense systems over the capital, according to the semi-official Fars news agency. 2 oil tankers carrying Saudi crude to Asia reversed course in the Red Sea after threats from Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi movement, fueling fears that the U.S.-Iran war is expanding into a new front.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to meet Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on the sidelines of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting in Manila. The talks come as regional leaders voice growing concern over the Iran conflict and its impact on energy security, while Rubio says Tehran is not serious about negotiations.
Unfortunately, so far, even though we have reached agreements, they have not kept their commitments. And as the President stated earlier today, I guess, today Washington time, yesterday our time here now, the problem we're having right now is that they're not serious about talks. If they're serious, we're serious. If they're not, then we will do what is necessary to protect that, our interest and also the interest of our allies. Phenomenal job.
Disarming the Iran-backed group Hezbollah, as well as securing Israel's military withdrawal from southern Lebanon, were on the top of the agenda at the meeting between US President Donald Trump and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the White House on Tuesday. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
Well, a diplomatic end to the hostilities between the US and Iran appeared a long way off as President Trump spoke to reporters in the Oval Office. Seated alongside the Lebanese leader, the US president vowed to keep striking Iran, warning the US would hit any site where Iran is considering developing nuclear capabilities. He also said that probably pretty soon they will be targeting an underground nuclear complex known as Pickaxe Mountain, and that there was nothing Iran could do about it. Now, he was also asked about a potential new front in the war with the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. He said that if they follow through on their threat to enforce a blockade of Saudi ships at the southern passage in and out of the Red Sea, that he will just have to take care of business. Well, the business at hand in the White House was Donald Trump's first ever meeting with the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun. Lebanon is looking for a path to long-term calm after months of war at home between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah militant group. So topping the agenda, disarming Hezbollah and ensuring it and Israel withdraw from southern Lebanon, the terms of the US brokered framework deal. But hours before the meeting, the Lebanese army claimed that Israeli troops opened fire near their units deployed in a so-called pilot zone. Now, President Trump said he would be prepared to speak to Hezbollah if the Lebanese leader thought that that would be helpful. But he was less forthcoming about speaking to its backer, Iran, saying that the Iranians are desperate to meet, but that until they are ready to convene in what Donald Trump described as a meaningful way, then the US has no interest in meeting them. And he said if the US left Iran tomorrow, the war would have been a big success, given that it will take Iran, he says, more than 20 years to recover from the damage it's endured. But he added, we're not leaving tomorrow. President Trump may be staying the course, but this conflict remains a problem for him here in the United States. Just 29% of Americans approve of his handling of the war, according to a Washington Post Ipsos poll published this week. And that doesn't bode well for Republican lawmakers standing in midterm elections later this year. Kate Fisher for A News in Washington.
Joining me now to discuss these talks further is Ross Feingold, political risk analyst, joining us from Taipei. Ross, welcome to Daybreak.
Hello.
Now, President Joseph Aoun arrived in Washington seeking stronger US backing for the framework agreement with Israel. What do you see as the principal objective for each leader?
I think President Trump wants this process to work. Look, we know that President Trump does like playing this role of a peacemaker. He's made that very clear ever since he came back into office in January 2025. He's been involved in settling several disputes in different parts of the world, including, for example, here in Asia between Thailand and Cambodia, in Africa, in Europe, and in the Middle East, notwithstanding that he also launched a war in the Middle East. So I think he wants this process to work. He certainly wants credit for it. The greatest outcome would be for Lebanon to join the Abraham Accords and enter into diplomatic relations with Israel, although granted at the moment that seems very unlikely. And for President Aoun, he wants to be the president that finally puts Lebanon on a track to long-term stability. All his predecessors in recent decades, even after the end of the Civil War in the early 90s, as well as the governments and the many prime ministers, have failed to do that. And no leader in Lebanon has been able to solve the problem of Hezbollah acting as a state within a state. And other problems, which I'm sure the audience is well aware of in Lebanon, including rampant corruption, breakdown in the provision of public services, the interference that went on from Syria for many decades, which now fortunately looks to be over with a new government in Syria. So I mean, he wants to be the person who goes down in history as putting Lebanon on a path to stability. But of course, to be fair to him, that's extremely challenging. And if he could have the support of the United States, it will help him to achieve those goals.
Okay. So aside from what the two leaders want, the Israel factor remains on the table always. And one of the central issues remains the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the remaining positions they hold in southern Lebanon. Is further progress realistic while Israel continues to argue that Hezbollah must first be prevented from rebuilding its military presence?
Yeah, unfortunately, we know from experience that unless Hezbollah truly does disarm and shift into being purely a political party, inevitably hostilities will arise again between Israel and Hezbollah. And it does seem at the moment that Israel's policy, and it probably won't change if there's a new prime minister after elections that are upcoming, it'll probably if it's a new government, it'll probably maintain the policy. And that policy is to maintain a security zone, whereas decades ago, Israel did withdraw from its security zone. When hostilities arose, Israel's troops moved across the border. But it does seem that as long as Hezbollah remains an armed organization, that even if under the framework agreement, Israel will withdraw from certain villages, and even that process now is not moving as smoothly as many would hope. It does look very likely that Israel is going to maintain a security zone north of the border.
And the Lebanese armed forces have already begun taking control of pilot zones vacated under this agreement. So beyond the symbolism, how important is this in demonstrating that the Lebanese state, not non-state armed groups, is reasserting authority?
I think that's certainly what the United States wants to see and what President Trump's team wants to see. And I think Israel wants to see that as well. I mean, that's why Israel did agree to the framework agreement. They do want to see the Lebanese army take control of security, and they want Hezbollah to give up its weapons. Ultimately, though, even if this works in pilot zones and in a few villages, will Hezbollah truly disarm? And that is the big question mark. And again, based on past experience, it's hard to be optimistic. But to the extent that the pilot zone process works and the Lebanese military can move in and take control of security, then again, I think the other stakeholders, whether that's United States, Israel, countries in the Persian Gulf that might be willing to invest in Lebanon, and that's an important aspect for which the precursor is security, that I think the other stakeholders are really rooting for this process to work.
Okay. Now, looking for your area of expertise here, President Aoun has presented proposals aimed at bringing all weapons under state control now. From a political risk perspective, how difficult is that? I mean, to reduce Hezbollah's military role while maintaining Lebanon's fragile domestic balance?
Well, Hezbollah's success has been based on several things since its establishment. One, of course, is the provision of social services that the Lebanese state has failed to provide, but also it's to engage in armed conflict with Israel, and that does bring it some support in parts of Lebanese society. It's hard to imagine them really giving up the weapons, and if they don't, hostilities inevitably arise. We've seen that pattern repeat itself. But if they're not willing to do that, then the goals we talked about for President Aoun to bring stability to Lebanon over the long term are really, really difficult to achieve. So, in a way here, the choice is ultimately up to Hezbollah. Do they want to function as a political party? Or do they want to function as an armed organization? And they can't be both going into the future. But if they want to be an armed organization, then it's a signal that conflict is inevitable.
And final question, Ross. As a political risk analyst, how would you assess the risks facing investors and reconstruction efforts in Lebanon? Could tangible progress on security begin changing perceptions of the country's long-term stability?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we saw the announcement after the two presidents met, the announcement by President Trump that he wants the United States aviation regulators to approve the resumption of flights between Lebanon and the United States. Now, whether any airlines will actually do that in the near term, that's going to be a commercial decision. But I think that's an important signal that President Trump wants the United States government, and we'll see what kind of follow-up there is, not just from aviation side, but other agencies in the United States government as well, to encourage investment in Lebanon. Look, at Lebanon, if it wasn't at war, it has so many great things going for it. An educated population, a great location, energy resources that have been developed offshore. It's a country with such huge potential if the different religious groups and ethnic groups could coexist peacefully and, of course, exist peacefully with its neighbors as well. If those challenges could be solved, Lebanon is certainly a country that I think foreign investors would be very eager to invest in.
Ross, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
A short break now, and when we return, we'll discuss the rest of the global story. Stay tuned.
More than 20,000 partisan fighters have been hidden. We found only 3,000.
My grandmother had 3 brothers. In the graveyard, the body of just one of them.
Their struggle was very unequal and against a state that had defeated such a force as Nazi Germany.
A lot of resistant fighters in the beginning of Soviet occupation actually would end up here, if not killed somewhere in the woods.
She was arrested at her home. Her 7-year-old daughter ran to her and screamed, "Mom, please take me with you." This report having the names of the individuals who were placed in the list of deportations.
I was born in Kengia, in a labor camp. My mother was a partisan liaison.
The first years were extremely difficult, of course. Poverty, hunger. The temperature sometimes dropped to -50 degrees.
The train stations, like the one behind me, once said goodbyes to thousands of people carried from across the Baltic states toward Siberia.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories this hour. Over in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has named a young Major General Mikhailo Drapati as the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's military. It's after days of street protests marking the biggest shake-up in the country's military leadership since its war with Russia began.
Ukraine's top military commander Oleksandr Syrsky has been dismissed by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who has appointed General Mikhailo Drapati as the new commander-in-chief. The decision follows days of nationwide protests after Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov was removed from his post last week. Reports suggested growing disagreements between Fedorov and Syrsky over the direction of the armed forces. That government reshuffle led to a political crisis that analysts say exposed weaknesses in Ukraine's domestic governing due to the lack of elections during the war. Fedorov had been defense minister since January and was widely credited with modernizing the military and tackling corruption. However, in his evening address, Zelenskyy said that he had offered Fedorov a decent post to oversee the technological component of the state.
I had a meeting with Mikhailo Fedorov today.
I offered Mikhailo a worthy position in the government, which would allow unity of the technological component of our state to ensure its development.
Syrsky, meanwhile, faced criticism from some who viewed his leadership style as outdated. Zelenskyy appeared to respond to growing public pressure by replacing him with Drapati, a younger battlefield commander seen as more open to military reform. Zelenskyy thanked Syrsky for helping defend Kiev during the early stages of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. The changes come at a critical stage of the war, with Ukraine seeking to strengthen its armed forces and improve coordination on the battlefield.
The Kremlin says Ukrainian strikes on warehouses owned by Russia's biggest online retailer have caused losses for businesses. Drones struck two Wildberries logistics hubs in the cities of Kotovsk and Elektrostal on Saturday. The attack sparked fires and disrupted operations at Russia's largest online marketplace, which handles more than 20 million orders a day. The Kremlin rejected accusations that Wildberries handles military supplies used for Russia's war effort. French lawmakers have approved a landmark social media ban for children under 15, delivering on a key pledge by President Emmanuel Macron. The law takes effect on September 1st. Ross Cullen reports.
Well, with this new legislation, France becomes the first European country to bring in age controls for social media. It's something that had broad cross-party support in the Senate and the National Assembly. It's an issue that's been worrying parents and politicians. Children under 15 doom scrolling, often late at night, the impact on children's learning capabilities, the knock-on effects of reduced attention spans at school, cyberbullying, access to inappropriate adult content, fake news, manipulated videos, and AI content as well. President Macron has made social policy one of his flagship pledges for his final year in office. Last week, French lawmakers approved legalizing assisted dying, and this week they have approved bringing in a social media ban. It will start from the beginning of the next academic year, so from the 1st of September, the under 15s won't be able to open an account on a platform like TikTok, Snapchat or Instagram. And from January next year, all existing accounts will also be impacted by the ban. There are some concerns, however, that were raised by lawmakers and civil society organizations to ensure that there is no impact on personal privacy when carrying out age verification, and also concerns about how to enforce this ban and make sure that children aren't simply using systems such as virtual private networks to circumvent the legislation. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
Moldova's parliament has approved a new government led by Prime Minister Vasil Tofan. He pledges to revive the economy and accelerate the country's path toward European Union membership. Tofan says his government aims to sign an accession agreement by 2028 and prepare Moldova to join the bloc by 2030. His appointment was approved by 53 lawmakers from President Maia Sandu's party of Action and Solidarity, while opposition parties abstained. The vote follows the surprise resignation of former Prime Minister Alexandru Munteniu after just 8 months in office. Hungarian Prime Minister Peter Magyar has issued a public apology after his hasty presidential nomination collapsed. Chess legend Judit Polgar rejected the offer just a day after it was announced, refusing to take on the burden of a divided nation. Facing intense political blowback, Magyar took full responsibility.
I am sorry if my enthusiasm, which stemmed from my joy and unconditional trust, led to communication errors that may have contributed to the situation that has arisen and to her decision. I bear sole responsibility for this. My fellow citizens, in recent days, many opinions and much criticism has been voiced regarding the process of nominating a head of state. While acknowledging that the process did not unfold in every respect, as many would have considered proper or ideal, I would like to emphasize once again that there will never be a process so perfect that it is supported by everyone. But just as we have done so far, we will continue to learn from our mistakes and experiences.
Senior European lawmakers are in Beijing for 3 days of talks with China's leadership. Both sides look to manage growing trade tensions and long-standing differences over Ukraine while keeping dialogue open. Anita Sharma has the details.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where senior European lawmakers are in Beijing for 3 days in a fresh effort to manage a relationship increasingly defined by trade disputes and geopolitical tensions. The delegation includes lawmakers from Germany, Spain, Italy, the Czech Republic, Poland, and Belgium. They're holding talks with China's top leadership, including Foreign Minister Wang Yi, as Brussels and Beijing grapple with growing disagreements over market access, critical minerals, and China's ties with Russia. During the meeting, Wang Yi addressed Europe's concerns over the trade imbalance, but according to China's foreign ministry, he urged the EU to promote a rational and objective perception of China and adopt positive and correct policies toward the country. Wang said China and Europe are partners rather than rivals and called for what he described as an upward dynamic balance in trade. The EU, however, says economic ties have become increasingly unbalanced. Diplomats say there's growing agreement amongst member states that China's large goods trade surplus with Europe has become a serious concern. Brussels has repeatedly criticized Chinese industrial subsidies, limited market access for European businesses, and restrictions on exports of rare earths and other critical materials. Neither side expects those differences to disappear overnight, but with the EU and China remaining two of the world's largest trading partners, both have a strong interest in keeping the dialogue alive, even as strategic competition increasingly shapes the relationship. China's stance on the war in Ukraine has also been a point of friction. Brussels accuses Beijing of supporting Moscow's war effort, including through recent allegations that China has helped train Russian troops, claims Beijing strongly denies. China and the EU are expected to hold talks later this year under their trade and investment consultation mechanism. The EU's trade chief has already said he wants those negotiations to deliver concrete results by October. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is urging the U.S. government to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he visits the country, citing the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant. The call comes as President Donald Trump says Netanyahu will not be arrested during his expected trip to the United States for the UN General Assembly.
As I've said, I agree with the ICC that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested and tried for his crimes, as I do for anyone else charged by the ICC. My administration has reviewed every avenue available under applicable law to determine whether New York City could execute the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant if Benjamin Netanyahu came here. It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does, and I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant. And I want to be equally clear. Benjamin Netanyahu is not welcome in New York City, nor is any other war criminal at large.
A handover of territory in southern Lebanon is raising hopes that displaced residents could eventually return home. The move follows a US-brokered security plan, which moves into its next phase.
The first handover of territory under the Pilot Zone program is now underway. Lebanese army troops have been deployed in Zouta al-Gharbia after Israeli forces withdrew from the area. Displaced residents gathered on the outskirts of the town, waiting for permission to return.
We have been waiting since the morning. We are waiting for the army's decision to allow the residents to enter the town, as the army promised that once the engineering regiment finishes its work, the residents may be allowed to enter. But so far, as we've been told, the engineering regiment hasn't finished yet because there are explosive devices and unexploded ammunition. It seems that things won't be resolved either today or tomorrow.
A senior Lebanese military official says engineering units are still clearing unexploded ordnance, and much work remains before the town can be declared safe. The handover is the first test of a US brokered plan under which the Lebanese army would confiscate weapons from the Iran-aligned Hezbollah group in parts of southern Lebanon, alongside phased Israeli troop withdrawals. Lebanon hopes the plan will help restore control over a strip of land around 10 kilometres deep that remains occupied by Israeli forces.
US and Mexican negotiators have begun 3 days of bilateral talks on revising the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. It's after Washington hit Ottawa with 50% tariffs on $20 billion worth of goods. The negotiations are the first formal discussions since the Trump administration declined to extend the 6-year-old pact, meaning it'll expire in 10 years. Mexico hopes to reach a new agreement by the end of the year. President Donald Trump's administration wants to reduce US trade deficits, bringing more manufacturing back to the country and strengthen North American supply chains against competition. Thousands of protesters returned to the streets of New Delhi on Tuesday, a day after violent clashes with police. They're keeping up the pressure on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government over allegations of widespread exam paper leaks. The youth-led Cockroach Janta Party movement says it will continue its campaign despite a police crackdown, while opposition leader Rahul Gandhi has joined the protests. With millions of young Indians backing the movement, the demonstrations have become one of the biggest political challenges of Modi's third term. However, the Education Minister promises reforms and debates. A Shanghai snow park is giving visitors a taste of winter during the height of summer, with some new residents proving to be the star of attraction. Ted Adeli and Gentoo penguins have officially settled into Shanghai's Yoexu Ice and Snow World. The birds now live in Aurora Town, where a year-round temperature of -6 degrees Celsius provides them with a suitable snowy habitat. The park has also launched regular penguin parades, giving visitors the chance to watch them waddle through the snow at close quarters, creating a winter-themed experience despite the sweltering summer heat. Now to a quick break. When we return, we'll discuss the key regional headlines.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jeddah. Challenges. Today is the third. We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Let's continue to look at stories from the region. Azerbaijan and Germany are expanding their strategic partnership with energy security, investment and trade at the heart of new agreements signed in Berlin. Both sides say the relationship now holds far greater potential.
President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are cementing a new strategic partnership in Berlin, launching a bilateral economic council to expand an already growing $1.5 billion trade turnover.
I am very glad that the relations between our countries are developing dynamically. Today, with the signing of a joint declaration, we are laying a foundation stone for the expansion of our relations. At the same time today, the establishment of a German-Azerbaijani Economic Council is being agreed upon. This is an important signal to companies in both countries.
Energy security is driving much of that momentum. Backed by a new 10-year supply contract with German firms, Baku continues to expand its footprint as a key energy provider for the continent.
Last year, our trade turnover with Germany stood at approximately $1.5 billion. Crude oil accounts for the main part of our exports. Azerbaijan is capable of supplying oil in the required volumes. This can be carried out both through domestic sources and through the trading arm of our energy company, Socar. In other words, there are no issues here.
However, to fully scale up Europe's gas infrastructure, President Aliyev stressed that European banks must reverse their current lending restrictions on fossil fuels.
It would be good for European banks to reconsider their decisions, especially considering that the crisis in the Middle East is, unfortunately, deepening. Traditional supply chains have broken down. Therefore, I believe that provided the green agenda is taken into consideration, these issues could be reviewed so that European banks allocate funds for the development of oil and gas projects, as well as the construction and expansion of infrastructure. In such a case, Azerbaijan could significantly increase its gas exports to the European market, including Germany.
As Germany looks to diversify its energy supplies, Berlin is increasingly relying on the Southern Gas Corridor. Responding to a question from A News, Chancellor Friedrich Merz outlined the country's long-term strategy for securing alternative energy sources.
Since we stopped gas deliveries from Russia 4.5 years ago, we have of course been looking for new sources of supply. Azerbaijan plays an important role here. This is an economically interesting prospect for us. I am once again grateful to President Aliyev that we were able to speak about this today and discuss the possibilities for an even greater procurement of gas from Azerbaijan.
Looking ahead, the two nations are advancing a new investment program to jointly develop hydrogen, renewables, and new transport corridors linking Europe and Asia.
President Ilham Aliyev's official visit to Germany elevated bilateral ties through a new joint declaration on a strategic agenda, establishing a comprehensive partnership beyond traditional energy cooperation. The visit included the creation of a German-Azerbaijani business council to strengthen commercial investment and private sector ties. This development signals a strategic realignment, with Germany becoming the second major Western European nation to establish a formal strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. Joining me now to unpack is Fuat Karimli, political analyst. Fuat, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, a mouthful, the Joint Declaration on a Strategic Agenda for Bilateral Partnership establishes for the first time a comprehensive framework covering political dialogue, energy, trade, security, innovation, education and humanitarian cooperation. So looking beyond this political symbolism, which elements of the declaration do you consider most significant, and how transformative could this document prove for Azerbaijani-German relations?
When we look at beyond the symbolism, I think looking at, energy, Azerbaijan has been having a lot of trade with the EU in the past couple of years, but then we see the strategic aspect of this because it carries political dialogue, cooperation and innovation, trade, security even. So we see a new a new step from Germany, specifically after the past few years. There had been some tensions between Azerbaijan and some EU countries. They tried to, impose some normative ideas on us. There were some specifically tensions with the European Parliament, specifically with PASE. But we see that Germany, specifically the biggest economy of Europe, kind of understood that Azerbaijan is this bulwark of peace and stability in the region. We saw the president of Germany say it's an island of stability. That's how he called Azerbaijan. And we see that this is opening up a new phase. So Germany is understanding the reality in the South Caucasus, and it sees that whatever Azerbaijan is doing in the region, it's right, because it's bringing stability to a region that's surrounded by conflict. So the political symbolism, beyond the political symbolism, we see that Germany is going in full swing in terms of strategic alignment with Azerbaijan, specifically after the visit of Ursula von der Leyen. We see that the biggest economy in Europe is taking this big step.
Okay. Now, yesterday there was a press conference held as well, and President Ilham Aliyev had some comments there. He commented on media reports alleging that German and Russian representatives had held a confidential meeting in Baku to discuss prospects for ending the war in Ukraine. Now, he noted that Azerbaijan had not been informed of any such meeting, but added that if such contacts contribute to peace, then they would be welcomed. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, when we look at this specific topic, it can be seen both ways. So I think when we look at specifically the idea of peace talks, it's always a positive thing. So whether this is back channel talks or formal talks, at the end of the day, if it achieves peace or if it goes towards achieving peace, it should be supported. It also, I think, underscores the neutrality of Baku, of Azerbaijan. So the two sides choosing to meet here, it shows that they see it as a safe haven where they can get together and have these talks as compared to other countries. And I think, we can look and say that it's covert, it's undercover, this kind of stuff, but this kind of stuff has always been happening. So Vienna has always been a venue for warring parties to meet each other as well.
Yeah. So there are more comments. He noted that Germany is Azerbaijan's second largest trading partner and reaffirmed Azerbaijan's readiness to increase natural gas exports should additional demand emerge from European markets. Now, what does that tell us about the growing strategic importance of Azerbaijan in Germany's long-term energy security and economic planning?
When we look at specifically energy, we see that Germany has been facing a lot of difficulties, specifically after the invasion of Ukraine, because it was highly dependent on Russia in terms of natural gas and energy. So we see Germany trying to diversify its long-term supply of energy, and Azerbaijan is obviously a key factor in this diversification. But I think it's not just in terms of natural gas, because we know that the EU has strategic plans long-term. Well, actually, when we look at it, it's even short-term, to phase out from natural gas and fossil fuels. And this doesn't necessarily represent the end of the road for Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan has been championing investments into green energy, specifically the green energy corridor in the middle corridor. And we kind of see it materializing as well. We see that Germany is interested in these kinds of investments, and we see it through the business, the working groups in terms of business as well. So there's high potential, not just in terms of natural gas, but also green energy. There's high offshore wind capacity of Azerbaijan as well in the Caspian Sea. So there's a lot of ways to collaborate, specifically not in energy, not just fossil fuels, but also renewable as well.
Now, the establishment, Fuat, of this German-Azerbaijani Business Council also creates a permanent platform linking public institutions and private sector. So how important could this new mechanism be in attracting investment, strengthening business cooperation and diversifying bilateral economic relations beyond some of the traditional sectors that you've also discussed?
Well, when we look at the formalization of this business association, we see that, first of all, the intention is to, like I said, make it formal, to have this hub, this center where people can go to and say, look, I want to invest in the other country, which sectors and which businesses are more profitable, a better option. And we see that the main idea here is to reduce the risk for investors, but also guide them into the proper channels. So obviously there's been investment going on for many years since independence of Azerbaijan, but making it kind of institutionalized shows the strategic importance of it, as well as the support that both governments are putting behind it in terms of incentivizing businesses to invest into one another.
And while energy, again, we discussed this in the previous question, remains a cornerstone of bilateral cooperation, the declaration also expands collaboration into renewables, low carbon hydrogen, digital transformation, innovation. Does this suggest that Azerbaijan is increasingly viewed as a long-term partner in Germany's energy transition rather than solely supplier of natural gas?
Definitely. I think one of the worries, at least from Azerbaijan's side, was that specific EU countries, they looked at the situation in terms of the war between Russia and Ukraine, and they just wanted a short-term solution. But I think the fact that the war has been dragging on so long, and that it's not just the invasion of Ukraine, but other wars that, for example, the conflict that's happening right now in the Middle East, the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, when we as the president once said in the Shusha Global Media Forum, when we look at flight radar, we saw that all of the planes were flying over Azerbaijan, so through basically the middle corridor. And I think that was kind of very symbolic for the EU to understand that if they want a stable, reliable, strategic partner in terms of connecting Asia to Europe, that it has to go through South Caucasus. So at a time where conflict is proliferating all over the world, the South Caucasus showed that it was able to put aside 30 years of differences and look forward by improving bilateral relations with, for example, Azerbaijan and Armenia, being supported by Georgia, and kind of balancing both Russia and Iran as well. So Azerbaijan has been able to walk this tightrope in terms of foreign policy and balance everyone. When we look at Germany, specifically the importance placed on green energy, it shows that since it does need long-term investment for Azerbaijan to build that infrastructure, Germany's pledge, it shows that it doesn't just see Azerbaijan as a short-term solution to its energy problems, but also as a long-term, reliable strategic partner in energy.
Now, Germany, Fuad, is also widely regarded as one of Europe's major decision makers. So could today's strategic partnership have wider implications for Azerbaijan-European Union relations, including future cooperation on connectivity, energy trade, and the modernization of Azerbaijan-EU partnership priorities, if you like?
Definitely. I think Germany does carry that political weight, specifically, not just in Europe, but in the whole world, I think, specifically with their economy, as well as their political influence in the EU institutions. So we see a kind of trickle-down effect, like I said, after Ursula von der Leyen visiting, that specific individual countries are now moving into the bilateral agreement stage with Azerbaijan, and we hope to see this continue. So Azerbaijan already provides energy to numerous EU countries, and it's been doing that at an increasing rate. And definitely, I think in terms of having that connection with Germany is very important, as it is the biggest, as far as I know, economy in Europe, and a very big, it has a very big role in decision-making within EU institutions as well.
Okay. Now, one of the other major talking points that's always on the table with EU relations is the peace track between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So just let's touch on that. The joint declaration expresses support for Azerbaijan, Armenia normalization and regional connectivity. Could Germany assume a more visible role, perhaps, in supporting the implementation phase of the peace process and encouraging broader regional cooperation?
Sure. I think when we look at the strategic alliance, we saw that there was also a clause about humanitarian efforts as well. We see that, at least up until now, our European nations had been reluctant to participate in the peace process, to an extent that some of them had even been, if I may say, sabotaging the process in itself as well. So putting blocks in the roads of bilateral talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But I think with the new reality, with the multipolar world, they understand that there's no logical argument in terms of blocking the peace. There's a peace going on. It's been materializing for a long time now between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and the only thing they can do is play a part in it. And we saw that in terms of the humanitarian efforts, Germany can actually play this role. It had not been doing that so far. EU had been one-sided in terms of the conflict, but now I think they see the reality and they see Azerbaijan as a strategic partner in that sense as well.
Fuad, thank you so much. I appreciate your contribution to Daybreak this morning and your analysis.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres will travel to Syria later this week for his first visit to the country since taking office. He's due to meet President Ahmed al-Shara and other officials in Damascus. Ahead of the trip, the UN Secretary-General's representative on Syria told the Security Council there are signs of hope for the country's future.
Despite the challenges underscored by security incidents, economic hardship, and unresolved local tensions, the opportunities for Syria are real if institutions are built that are inclusive, accountable, and capable of delivering for all Syrians, building confidence across Syria's diverse communities. Sustained commitment from the international community, including this Council, will remain critical.
Italian and Turkish defence firms have taken a major step towards pairing crewed jets with autonomous fighters in combat. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Italian aerospace company Leonardo and Turkish defence firm Baykar have revealed new details of successful flight trials in which a crewed aircraft and an uncrewed fighter flew together in autonomous formation. The findings were presented on Monday at the Farnborough International Air Show in the UK, highlighting technological advances expected to play an increasing role in future aerial combat. The air trials were conducted in May at Baykar's test center in Çorlu using Leonardo's M346 jet and Baykar's Bayraktar Kızılelma unmanned fighter aircraft. During the tests, the Kızılelma took off autonomously before joining the M346 in mid-flight. Once airborne, pilots aboard the M346 assumed control of the unmanned aircraft using a newly developed avionics and computing system. They issued commands for a range of maneuvers, including position changes, separation, and rejoining formations, which the Kızılelma then implemented autonomously. The tests marked the program's transition from simulations to real-world flight operations following months of joint development by engineering teams in both Turkey and Italy. The two companies say data collected during the tests will now be used to stage more complex missions in which crewed and uncrewed aircraft operate in tandem to achieve common objectives. Additional flight tests of greater operational complexity are planned in the coming months. The joint tests are part of a broader strategic partnership between Baykar and Leonardo, which established the LBA Systems joint venture last year to develop and produce unmanned aerial systems. Baykar brings its expertise in advanced uncrewed platforms, while Leonardo contributes electronic technologies for crewed and uncrewed teaming and swarming operations. According to both companies, these collaborative efforts help reduce pilot workload and improve combat effectiveness, while keeping human decision-making at the heart of aerial combat missions. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Azerbaijan's Sabah FK will take a slender advantage into next week's return leg in Finland. It's after beating KUPS 1-0 in the first leg of the UEFA Champions League's second qualifying round tie. Katie Wilson sent us this report.
Well, the final whistle has blown a 1-0 victory to Sabah. You can probably hear Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive" going on behind me. That's the victory song that we tend to hear when it's been a pink and black victory. Now, this was a game dominated by Sabah. Sabah fans are clearly very happy with the result, 65% possession in Sabah's favour, but only one goal on the scoreboard. Now, these fans seem to be pretty happy, but bearing in mind Sabah has to travel to Finland next week, as this is a two-leg tie. Will 1-0 be enough? And how happy will Sabah be with this? Will they have wanted more, since they did dominate this game and the next leg is going to be away? So it makes for a very interesting second leg here, and we'll have to see whether that 1-0 victory at home was enough, or whether we'll see a bit of a change in tactics when they play away to Finland. But it has to be said, a 1-0 victory is clearly enough for these fans, who are very happy to see their home team winning in this Champions League qualification match.
Disappointed, honestly, saying, okay, we won the game, this is what counts, but I think we should have won 4-0, or at least with a bigger margin. But yeah, our ultimate goal was to win. A bit disappointed because of the result, but I think we also played a very good game, but didn't manage to score more goals. So yeah.
First half they could have scored 2 or 3 goals easily. So yeah, 1-0 going back home halfway. It's a positive result.
Thank you for watching Daybreak this morning with me, Dilek Tuna. Stay tuned to A News for more updates throughout the day.